Was that more personality traits that weren't a good fit, or was it more of a skill set issue that you found in general?
Both. I
Okay.
think, it happens in all industries. A lot of times when people work for a company for a while, they just start to get promoted, and it doesn't mean they have
Yeah.
the skill sets to do the jobs in which they've been promoted into.
Yeah.
And so I think we
100%.
had a little bit of that. Like we had people who definitely loved working for us, and they came to work every day, and they did their best, but they just
Yeah.
weren't qualified to be in the roles they were in. And so
Yeah.
that's where it's unfortunate, but you have to clean house sometimes to be like, this is not working. And so we've built a really great team over the last 6 to 8 months. So we have a very fleshed out and qualified and amazing senior management group right now. And then we're
Mm.
just kind of trying to push that knowledge and leadership from that team down. So we've worked on some manager development courses, some training courses for our bud tenders. Just like how can we make the people that we are bringing in now as successful and good at their jobs as we possibly can.
Hey, Samantha, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Ben?
I'm doing awesome. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Um, I figure we can just start out kind of giving your personal background. How did you get into cannabis? Tell me a little bit about your company that you have in New Mexico, and we'll just kind of kick it off with that.
Well, absolutely. So my personal history is I've been mostly in accounting for the last 20 some years. That's my strong suit, my background. But just my personality type has kind of led me into always digging into process improvement projects and project management. I'm the type of person who just always wants to know how something works, why is it working that way, and how can we do it better.
Very rare in
So
this industry.
I've yeah, um, it is. And so I've worked in many different industries, which I think has definitely helped me in cannabis. I've worked in the automotive industry for a long time. I worked for a medical device manufacturer for several years. And they were a global scale. So that definitely gave me some insight to a different level of operations that was very helpful for me, especially coming into cannabis. And then I worked for a local company out in New Mexico. They are called 505 Southwestern. They're a food manufacturer. Their primary thing is salsa and green chili, of course. And that was really that I think has been some of the most helpful stuff that I brought to cannabis is taking that manufacturing and harvest and all of that kind of knowledge and then pivoting it into cannabis. And while I was working that job, I went back to school. And then when I graduated, I went to work for a friend of mine who runs a consulting and accounting firm here in New Mexico. And her company just kind of found this niche of cannabis companies that needed accounting and back office and bookkeeping kind of things because there just
Mhm.
wasn't hardly anybody in New Mexico that was taking on those clients.
Yeah,
And that's how I
different
got into
ballgame.
cannabis. Yeah, yeah. And it's been a crazy ride ever since. So one of one of the clients there was Best Days, and they were my primary client. And then I just kind of came on board and have been working there for directly for Best Days now for just about a year as their COO, and it's been a crazy awesome ride.
Oh yeah, it's a whole different ballgame when you're on this side. Even when you see all the issues, kind of it as a secondary company. I think it's you have to go through it yourself to really understand the
Oh
craziness.
yeah,
That's pretty cool that
yeah.
you have a really eclectic background, and I feel like that, like you said, the scale especially, right? Because a lot of people in cannabis, maybe they've never even worked in another industry in general or had another job, but they almost certainly haven't done something to a much higher scale on average. I mean, there's obviously exceptions, but the vast majority of the operators, this is the biggest thing they've ever done, right? So it's kind of like, how do they see to the future when they don't even know what that looks like? And I think having someone like yourself that has been beyond that and knows what you're working towards, sort of as a organizational development pathway, is pretty valuable, I'd imagine. Tell me a little bit about Best
But
Days and your role there,
I think
obviously as CEO.
that's exactly kind of where I was going to go with that. Is I think that's where I've been able to kind of really fit and help Best Days grow over this last year. They're a vertically integrated operator here. They started. The owners are a father-son team, Len and Eli Goodman. Len is the president of the board, and Eli's the CEO. And Len had one of the first licenses here in New Mexico when it was first just medical only in 2009.
Yeah.
And he had another company, and that one kind of, came and went. And then in 2018, Eli came back to New Mexico. He was living in California, and him and his dad just started Best Days with one dispensary in Santa Fe. And then they grew to two out of Santa Fe. And then in 2021, we opened, no, 2021, we opened 5 dispensaries. And then in the last year, we have opened 2 more, with about possibly 2 more on the way. We have our own cultivation site. We have our own kitchen where we manufacture tons of edibles and drinks. And we have a packaging and distribution center that's opening up. So it's been a mom and pop shop, but as they've grown over the last few years, and definitely as we've entered the rec market, it has needed a lot more kind of corporate structure. And that's, I think, where I've been able to bring in some of that previous experience working for really big organizations to help them kind of streamline a lot of processes and go from we still want the mom and pop feel, but now we're just at a level where we have to operate much more streamlined and much more efficiently. And the market is part of that. It's way too saturated for us to not make really strategic moves at this point.
I feel like there's kind of a dichotomy, at least in the mindsets of a lot of the operators, that they're either like craft or they're, sold out corporate cannabis dealing with mids only, right? So what are some of the strategies or methods that you've used to retain that kind of small mom and pop feel as you do grow scale, which inevitably means you've got to mature the operations and sort of bring things out from the artistic, like super hands-on, I'd imagine, types of processes to make it more applicable to a bigger group of people, right?
I think part of that strategy has come where we place our dispensaries. So the first one, Eli and Len had picked specifically because it's kind of in a I would define it, I guess, as a lower income part of Santa Fe. And that's because they wanted the product to be accessible to those who needed it. And they've continued placing dispensaries in areas like that. And I think that gives us still that mom and pop where it's like, well, we're in the places where we know that people maybe can't afford they're not going to go to the craft places. They're there for medicinal reasons. And I think even, recreational users or adult use, they're, regardless of if it's rec or medical, everyone's using it for some medicinal purpose. It's like, well, do you just want to feel better mentally or physically, whatever? And we want to continue providing that availability to people. So that's how we kind of keep that mom and pop thing, is just where do we place them? We're not just trying to go for this is a high traffic area, therefore that's where we want to place it. It's more like, where can we put it where people need it? And we try to find places and this has become very challenging now, but we do try to find places that maybe there's not a lot of dispensaries in that area. And the challenge, though, has been, like you said, how do we keep that and continue continuing to grow with this market? And so we did open up a big, beautiful, amazing flagship store just off of the plaza in Santa Fe. And that is a different market. And I think that is one of the challenges that we're finding is how can we now kind of market to a new demographic, but still feel mom and pop. And I think we're in the middle of finding that perfect balance, and it's definitely tough.
I mean, you're recognizing that you need different messaging for different sort of consumer profiles, though, which is another thing that I think a lot of, brands are like, well, I'm just going to market to everybody equally. And they don't realize that you do need to speak to different people in a different method. So that makes a lot of sense that you guys are kind of focused on that right now. And I like that you guys have seemingly prioritized access as like your main driver for some of these retail placements. Does that carry over to your manufacturing and cultivation operations as well in terms of, I don't know, the type of growing method or, how you maintain your cost control and things like that, especially as an accountant? I imagine that's probably one of your strengths.
But well, since we are, mainly focused in Santa Fe, that's kind of our hub, and we've captured a lot of that market. That is where our indoor cultivation is. We have a facility very close to that where we package all of our things, and our distribution centers, like maybe again another 5 minutes away from that. So we do kind of try to centralize a lot of that work. And part of that is as we've grown and continue to grow is why we've opened a distribution center, is because we've kind of now figured we have so much going on in so many different facilities, and we needed to centralize that so that we can just start dispersing it out in a more efficient manner.
Oh yeah. I feel like every facility you have, it's like a whole nother business to run. So if you don't need to have them separated, you should absolutely consolidate.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's something that I have found very exciting and challenging as COO. Every department, and especially, and maybe it's this way in any industry. I haven't come into an organization at this level before, but every department is like its own unique, crazy kind of like independent business that it is, and then you've got to like make them all work together to be successful, and that's been a lot of fun to manage and bring all together, but it's very interesting because it's like you want to look at the big picture, but everybody's got their own craziness and their own magic happening within each facility, and that's it's part of why I like what I do. But it's definitely I found a far greater challenge than I thought it was going to be, but I like it.
Never a dull day, that's for sure. I feel like with the vertical integration, right, it's bad enough when you've got multiple facilities, but it's really challenging with vertical integration because you truly are managing multiple different businesses. Yes, they're, sort of arbitrarily wrapped under some parent company, but they operate completely differently, right? A retail store has almost no similarities whatsoever to manufacturing operation, and similarly to a cultivation, especially, I don't know if you guys do outdoor or greenhouses, but I mean, I would say probably an indoor facility is probably the most like manufacturing because you can control stuff. But when you're talking about an outdoor greenhouse, it's a farm, it's not the same business whatsoever. So I think people struggle so much just to run one business, and then they're trying to run 3 or 4 different types of businesses. And it's no wonder. I mean, it's hard enough for people to even succeed with one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is kind of what makes it so exciting, and I feel like a good fit for me personally is that, like I said, I've come from many different areas, and now this job is like every job I've ever had all rolled into one. So it's like I have a retail, I have a manufacturing, we have a distribution. I've got to run all the businesses I've ever touched is all together in one place, and that's not for everybody. So I think a lot of the legacy operators here in New Mexico are vertically integrated, and so they're managing, I think, through this really tough market, and us as well. I think that's what kind of allows us to continue to be successful here in New Mexico, is that we've had plenty of years to figure out how to do all the parts. Um,
You know,
and that's been
do you feel like the
cool.
vertical integration is an advantage? I know, like if I would ask this question 3 or 4 years ago, I feel like everybody, including myself, would have, without even hesitating, said yes. I feel like in certain markets, probably not New Mexico yet to the same degree because it is newer in a recreational sense, right? But I feel like a lot of the markets that are starting to age a little bit, a lot of operators are moving away from that a little bit, right? And they're realizing maybe I'm not as good at X, Y, or Z, so why don't I partner with somebody else that does that, and then I could focus on sort of where my core competencies are. But that being said, I've only ever been involved with vertically integrated companies, and that's because, similar to you, what you just said, I feel like there's certain protections that you get with that I can't see how we could have survived certain things if we didn't have that entire supply chain under our control. Do you see it similarly, or like what's your stance on that?
I think are at the point of we've always had kind of some other third party vendors to kind of supplement areas in which we cannot do all of the things. We could do almost all the things, but not quite all the things. And I
Give
think
me
we're
some
leaning a little
examples.
bit more into like what we used to do our own distillation and vapes in-house.
Mm,
And that was just one of those things where it was like, that is a very specific, very delicate process, and that is
mm.
just better done elsewhere by people who just do that. So we've
Definitely
taken
agree
that
with
out
that.
of
Yeah,
our operation.
yeah, that's smart.
Yeah. But almost everything else we've kept in-house. It's just kind of supplementing, I think, products so that we can still give a lot of options to our customers at different price points. So like we said, we
Mm,
still want to be available to those who need the medicine, and that way we
yeah.
want to give them a good quality product at a value price. But then we
Mm,
can bring in some other, really top-notch products that we love, and offer those at kind of different price points. So that's where I think we kind of just find that good, happy balance between like what can we offer, and we try to keep and that's where it does help us is being vertically integrated. We can keep our price points really low and offer those value products to the people who can't afford, kind of these like national brands or other
yeah.
items that may be a little bit higher prices. So that's where I think our benefit comes from being vertically integrated. The challenge, like I said, is some of those areas like vapes and stuff, that's just an area we no longer want to touch. So we partner with some other companies who we provide, the biomass, and they extract and do all the things for us and turn it around.
Yeah.
That's been very helpful. Another thing that we're doing that we find to be very helpful in pairing with the vertical integration is um, we've partnered with so far with Old Pal out of California. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're their current provider here in New Mexico. And that has been something that we find to be very interesting, is finding kind of these new license deals so that we can
Yeah.
use our vertical integration system to bring in new products to New Mexico, which has been really fun.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of collaborations like that too, because as someone that's been on both sides of those types of licensing deals, I will say, speaking as someone that's brought in a licensing deal, let's say to do the co-production or co-manufacturing, I think it also gives you an air of authority, especially when you're dealing with a big company like Old Pal, and you guys are close to California, relatively in geographical sense. So I'm sure that there's a lot of knowledge of that brand already. And then when it's like, oh, Best Days produces this, then all of a sudden, if you want to pursue other types of deals, joint ventures or whatever, you're able to kind of lean on that relationship, right? And say, hey, look, we're the manufacturer of one of the bigger brands in the country, right?
Yeah, and I think that is definitely one of the benefits of partnering with someone like Old Pal. I mean, they come in and they have very high standards of quality, and if we're meeting them, I think that's definitely a feather in our cap to say if we're
Mm-hmm.
able to meet the standards of this national brand, that and we extend that throughout our own brands, it definitely says we're providing the best products we possibly can to our customers.
I mean, as another operations person, I will admit that there's been times that I have learned great practices from these engagements with other brands, right? Because they might produce something that we don't know. And they say, hey, we'll bring our SOPs over and train you guys on it, right? And then all of a sudden you can add that to your toolkit of processes that because as we all know, it's so hard to learn. You have to kind of learn a lot of this stuff yourself. There's not like a really great repository of, especially on the manufacturing side of more than anything, knowledge on how to do all this different stuff, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the greatest benefits of collaboration is, there's always room to improve. There's always room to learn. So if we can take these top level companies and work with them, we can pull those bits of information and just continue to grow our company to be the best we possibly can, which, that's what we're always striving for, is just how can we possibly bring like the best product to our customers every single day and to give them the best experience. So I think that's been an awesome benefit of working with people like Old Pal. And they're a great group. Like, I really have enjoyed working with that team. So that's been fun.
Just for shits and giggles, what has been kind of your favorite part of working with them specifically in this type of engagement?
I think they're really kind of true to their brand. Like, they're very focused and business forward, but they're like laid back, fun people. And that's always kind of the awesome thing about working in cannabis, right? Is that you get to work with like a lot of fun people. Like, generally you're not finding like stodgy, stuffy, not cool people in cannabis.
Spoken like someone that doesn't live in Illinois. The land of the MSOs is a little bit different out here, but yeah, I know what you mean though.
Yeah,
The West Coast and Southwest, it's like a different ball game, I feel like.
Yeah, New Mexico's New Mexico's its own special beast. We're the land of mañana for a reason. So we kind of come in with a laid back attitude. We like, laid back people that we can work with because that's just how we roll here.
That makes sense. That's kind of a challenging fit with how fast paced and almost manic I feel like the cannabis industry can feel at times. It's always feels like you're behind and it's gotta.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I find challenging about the cannabis industry is the New Mexico mindset. It's in the people who come to work for you. It's in the people you work with vendors and businesses. And while it can be really beneficial and awesome and cool, like I said, you get to work with a lot of people. There's kind of just a general New Mexico frame of mind that is like
no urgency, kind of.
Yeah, it's like, okay, but we're running a business and it's crazy and every day is crazy and every day is different and I need everyone like going as fast as I'm going, and not everyone wants to go that fast.
What have you been doing to sort of overcome that challenge with your people?
I would say one of the first things that I did when I came into this role was I really did like a full staff and manager assessment, and just kind of like, where are we at with these people? How did they get here? What roles do they have? And are those good fits? And really, a lot of them were not. And so that was a challenge for sure. It's not fun to have to come in and kind of start cleaning house, but it is one of the things that.
Sorry to jump in. Was that more personality traits that weren't a good fit, or was it more of a skill set issue that you found in general?
Both. I think, it happens in all industries. A lot of times when people work for a company for a while, they just start to get promoted, and it doesn't mean they have the skill sets to do the jobs in which they've been promoted into. And so 100%. I think we had a little bit of that. Like, we had people who definitely loved working for us, and they came to work every day and they did their best, but they just weren't qualified to be in the roles they were in. And so that's where it's unfortunate, but you have to clean house sometimes to be like, this is not working. And so we've built a really great team over the last 6 to 8 months. So we have a very fleshed out and qualified and amazing senior management group right now. And then we're just kind of trying to push that knowledge and leadership from that team down. So we've worked on some manager development courses, some training courses for our bud tenders, just like how can we make the people that we are bringing in now as successful and good at their jobs as we possibly can. And so it's a lot of like employee development initiatives that we're working on. So it was kind of like clean and then like provide them some new knowledge and information just to help them get as far as they possibly can. And maybe that's not with us, but at least like while they're here, we're trying to give them all the tools to be successful that we can.
It seems so obvious, right? Like when you think about it, and yet so many companies don't invest in their people, right? In cannabis in particular, but everywhere. But they try to, they just keep them at the bottom of the barrel price, in terms of their pay scale. But then on top of that, they also don't invest in their training like what you guys are doing. And it's like, don't you want these people to be more valuable and be able to coach them up so that they can be qualified for these positions perhaps? And at least you'll find out in that coaching process if there's no chance of that and avoid that issue, because I hear it so much, and that's why I'm always like pretty firm in my stance on organizational structure, especially in the startup environment. Is you got to be really careful with your first people and the types of titles that you're handing out, because all of a sudden you're like Oprah, you're a director and you're a director, and they don't have anybody under them, or like one or two people. But then, like you mentioned, the worst part is that they're not really qualified for that, which doesn't matter too much when you're small. But then as you start that scaling process, you find that you outgrow those people, and they might have made huge sacrifices to start in the company with, and it's like you're between that rock and a hard place, because the company can't benefit or grow any further with them in the position they're in. But also, like, how many times have you successfully told someone, hey, we got to like bring you down 2 notches because you're just not good at this? Like, okay, no problem. Like, you're screwed at that point, right? And so it's like you're going to have a bad relationship, or you're just going to have someone in a position that they just can't handle. It's tough as a leader to, especially coming in after the fact, like yourself, I'd imagine, to make those calls.
Well, I'll be completely honest. I am not naturally empathetic at all.
Accountant.
I try to
You're a number.
I try to bring in, and that's where I feel like I've done the best service to Daze, is that I brought in senior leaders who are those things.
Very smart, yeah.
And it's sometimes a slow process because, every day there's like something blowing up that everyone has to like all hands on deck, and we have to deal with this other thing, or now there's this challenge happening. So a lot of our initiatives have been slow, and that's definitely been the most challenging part, I think, for me, is that I know where I want us to be, and I know where I want our people to be, and to feel safe and comfortable and like happy to come to work every day. But sometimes those things take a long time, and that is hard. Because, what I know and what I am capable of, kind of on that empathy level is hard for me. But I have brought in like a really great HR person, and like I said, some other like department leaders who are really good. And I think that's what's going to really help get us there, is because they have the qualities that I do not. And that's kind of what makes your good team, right? Is where you're lacking, so you bring in other people who can fill those spots.
100%, but that's only possible when you have self-awareness and enough emotional intelligence to know the areas that you're weak in. And the thing is, everybody's weak in something, but there's so much ego often in this industry that people don't want to admit that they have any weaknesses, so they just continue barging through with these like things that are really harming their efforts, whether that's an inability to empathize, or just not being a detail-oriented person, but they're in charge of things that require a lot of detail, or bad communicator, same story, right? Like whatever that is. And if they don't find someone to help them through that weakness or fix the weakness, then the company is basically only ever as good as its weakest link, which in some cases is a pretty damn weak link, So I think that's awesome that you've been able to notice that and then bring in people that can do that for you. Because like you said, I think it's not just one person that makes a great company. It's the people together and filling in those gaps.
Absolutely. And cannabis is, especially as a vertically integrated, as we kind of mentioned before, with each
Yeah,
department seeming kind of like its own independent business, all functioning together. There's just no way like one person can be charged with all of it. You just have to have a
definitely not.
good, strong team. Like
Yeah.
I would be nowhere without, most of my staff. They're just absolutely incredible.
There's a lot of talk right now about sort of the rescheduling or descheduling of cannabis. Who knows if it's going to happen or not? People like to talk, but
Yeah.
assuming that it does, obviously that's going to, as an accountant, you're probably even more up to speed on the impacts in terms of like 280E.
Yeah.
Like to me, one of the biggest challenges of creating a solid organization that other industries don't encounter is that you don't want to add too many people that are covering something at a corporate level, right? Because you can't write that off on your cogs, and so you have to almost
Yeah.
maintain as lean of a team as you possibly can at the top, even as you're growing somewhat rapidly at the bottom. And it's pretty much inevitable, at least in my experience, that those people are going to be completely overwhelmed, including yourself, right? Like you're the head of that pyramid. And then there's going to be things that you guys just aren't capable of doing because you actually need a specialist to do it, but it doesn't make sense financially. Do you guys have
Yeah.
challenges like that? And are you looking at how that's going to maybe change once we're not paying, 80-90% of the money to taxes?
Yeah. We absolutely do have challenges like that. I mean, just this morning, I was thinking to myself, like, damn, I really wish I could have an executive assistant who could manage all these other things for me so I could focus on a lot of stuff that I need to be doing.
Yeah.
But there's no room for that. There's like, I really need like a full marketing team, but like, there's no room for that. So yeah,
Right.
the other part of that challenging bit with like finding employees at any level from bud tender all the way to the top is one, yeah, can we afford this, knowing that like there is no tax deduction for most of this. And
Right.
then the second bit is, can you find someone who can and is willing to do all the things because there's
Right.
not the room for support staff. And that is hard for all of us. So the burnout, I think, in cannabis is probably very high, partially for that reason.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, everyone's almost required to be an entrepreneur, regardless of what their role is or pay, really, right? Which is really hard on the people that come in the front line in a lot of these companies, and they're making, 15 bucks an hour, 20 bucks an hour, but they're being asked to do stuff that they would never be asked to do in another company, or they would be being paid double the amount. But there's just no real good way to get around that because the company just can't afford it otherwise, right? So it's definitely a challenge for folks to figure that out. What are you doing to sort of address that burnout proactively?
I think what I am doing is I am trying to find my own balance and lead by example. Lately I know I've been just working, kind of all hours of the day and weekends
Yeah.
and all the things, but I can't um I can't in good conscience ask my staff to take care of themselves if they're like, well, what are you doing? Like,
Isn't that
yes,
funny? It's
I
like
realize that.
the opposite of what most people would think, right? Most people would think the leadership's not doing much, and then they're asking their people to do a lot. And I'm in the same boat as you. I'm like a complete workaholic, and that's always been the biggest challenge for me because I do believe in work-life balance, but it's like a do as I say, not as I do type thing often, right? Um,
Oh yeah.
so yeah, you do have to lead by example, and that can be the hardest thing of all, I feel like,
Oh,
interestingly.
it's so hard. I mean, the fact that I didn't work at all over Labor Day weekend is just mind-boggling but I had to actively like, don't go open your computer. Don't do
Right.
it. Don't,
You're sitting
because
there
then I'll
like,
be
what
sucked
am
in for the
I?
entire day.
I feel
Yeah, because
useless.
I do. And my family thinks otherwise. They're like, can't you just hang out with us for the weekend? And
Right.
so and I do say that of my staff. It's like, like you've got vacation days. You need to take them. Go on a vacation. You are obviously stressed. And so I can try to push that on them to make sure that they're taking time for themselves, but
Hmm.
I also have to do that myself so that I think leading by example is just really kind of one of the best things that you can do as a leader, is because the do as I say and not as I do is um it's just bullshit. It's
Yeah.
really like how you can't get the respect of your staff, your people, your team, whatever, if you are not following the same rules, whatever those are, whether it's taking vacation or, just following the same work policy rules, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to fall in line as well.
That's always been a big challenge for me, is kind of the one sort of carrying the banner of policy change, right? Is getting the other partners to follow it, because there is often that mindset of like, well, and it's ironic because the folks that are the worst at doing that are often the ones that are the most like aggressively policing it on other people. It's like, you're not even doing this.
Yeah.
Like, not only do they not respect it, but I feel like, if you how are you going to imply that it actually matters if you're not doing it? Like, there's no ability to really emphasize that it's important. There's no trust there when they see, well, it doesn't matter enough for you to do it, so you're
Exactly.
telling me to
Exactly.
suit up every time I go into the nursery, and yet you're just walking in there, and anytime you got a friend around, you guys are just waltzing in there without putting any PPE on at all.
Yeah.
It could be frustrating for sure as a operations person that's trying to build uh sort of a system around that when you've got to fight your own people at the top.
Often I think that is where I find a lot of finding the happy like marriage of like all the levels of the organization, right? It's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, yes, you guys have to do this, and you have to, regardless if I'm able to get these people to do it. Like, and you guys
Right.
have to because I'm trying to get these people to do it. It's just it's a battle.
Yeah, got to get that buy-in top to bottom.
Absolutely.
um if you had to like identify one or two things that in your experience sort of separates the companies that are succeeding from those that aren't, whether in your market or just kind of in general in cannabis, what would you identify those factors as?
I think it's mostly centered around organization. If a company, no matter how big or small they are, if they are organized and
Mm.
know what the plan is, what the goal is, and they actually have kind of built the structure. Even kind of back to your point of talking about like an org chart and like what people should be in what roles, um, and what, you know, facilities do we need? What partnerships do we need to have? As long as like everything is organized, I think that really helps any organization be successful. When you're operating knee jerk and just kind of
Mm.
like, oh shit, didn't think of that.
Yeah,
That just opens up so much room for wasted time and money that makes you um, definitely have less chance of success if you're not prepared.
I completely agree. It seems so simple again, and yet it's these simple fundamentals that are often the things that are missed. I feel like there's huge amounts of money lost in flip-flopping on directives. I mean, I've seen entire facilities be built out with millions of dollars of equipment be used for a couple months, and then it's like, oh, we're switching all this out, go throw that in the storage, and it's like,
Oh my God.
yeah. And then now you're putting another several $1 million into it, and you guys haven't even like covered a fraction of the capex that you just spent. So it's crazy, and I think it's even worse when people are spending other people's money, which is obviously a little bit less of the case these days. But I think we've all seen that, right? We've seen people just go out there and aggressively grow and gain assets and like not use them, and then try to sell them for
Mhm.
loss or like switch them around. It's like, if you don't have a path of what you're trying to do, how do you expect to get wherever you're not even going? you know
Yeah, exactly. In New Mexico, there's, a very saturated market right now. And I think
Hmm.
it's interesting to me to see like licenses and one-off retail shops continue to open up because I
Hmm.
I just wonder, like, what is your game plan? Like, what plan have you come into where you're like, I'm gonna make more, I'm gonna make money in this industry? Like, not right now, you're not. So how can we keep opening stores? And to me, that is just a sign of like maybe not being prepared because they don't know what they're getting into. And
100%.
that is where I think a lot of cannabis companies in New Mexico anyway are eventually going to fail is they just don't recognize or know what they're really getting into. Because it's a whole different ballgame than anything else like anyone's ever done. So even if, like myself coming in where
Yeah.
I've had lots of manufacturing experience, I've had retail experience, I've had accounting, I know all these different areas of business, but
Yeah.
cannabis, it kind
Yeah.
of
It's
takes it and
harder.
all blows it up.
It's
Yeah.
definitely more challenging. And I think that's the big issue. You hit it right on the head there is like, there's too much assumption that it's like legacy trap days, right? Where it's like, hey, if you grow good weed, sell it. It's that simple. And don't worry about
Yeah.
taxes, employees, liabilities, none of that stuff. You're going to sometimes sell it to people. And if you front anything, there's a risk there that they won't pay you back. So most people don't do that. It's usually just COD, and it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like outside of us dealing with the same plant, it's actually nothing. It's not even comparable. That is the only similarity, is that you're dealing with the same plant, but all of the business infrastructure doesn't exist on that side. There wasn't, even the biggest manufacturers still weren't dealing with the top 10 challenges that you deal with in a licensed regulated market. So it's just
Yeah.
it's not comparable, like you said. And yeah, so it's like, how do you know what you're looking for when you don't even know what you're looking for? Like I think there's just ignorance there, right? They don't know how to analyze a macro market. They're not necessarily coming in from other industries, although sometimes they are, and that's pretty interesting. When I see someone from finance come in
Yeah.
super late to the game, and I'm like, how did you not see the writing on the wall here? It happened in Michigan. Like the price of bulk materials had already gone down tenfold, and there was still just massive amount of people every day getting new licenses. Retail's opening up,
Yeah.
15, 20 of them in a city of 20,000 people or less. Just every block there would be like two or three of them, like a mattress firm store. I don't know if you guys have those out here in Illinois.
Yeah.
You drive down the road and there's like a mattress firm on the left side, and then you look to the right side, there's a mattress firm like 5 feet away from it. It's like, that's definitely a money laundering
Yeah.
situation. But
Yeah, no, we're
it's interesting.
definitely in the same boat here in New Mexico. And just recently, I think Best Days was part of this kind of letter to legislation. Is we were asking for kind of a moratorium and put some sort of cap on this licensing, because although we understand that they wanted to make it, something that anybody could get into. Now everybody's in it, and it's just really fucked the market. And like the intention of the state, I think, was there, but they didn't understand what they were doing. And now us, like I think probably many other states, are at this tipping point where it's like we're going to have to make some sort of regulatory changes because one, it's making it really difficult, obviously, right, for all of the existing companies to continue to all fight each other for the same small pie.
It
And
gets
it's
smaller,
not
yeah.
really giving anybody a chance that's now coming into it. Like, what chance do they really have? You're really just setting them up for failure. It's just because you made the barrier to entry low doesn't mean that that is a successful opportunity for them. And that's
Look
what
at
I think the
Oklahoma.
intent was.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the prime example of that right there. That's the lowest barrier to entry, I believe. I don't know if New Mexico's lower than that, but I mean, you could get a license for like $1,000 or something like that, and there's just no one made
Same
any
here.
money. Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it went from, yeah, I don't remember how much it was, like hundreds of thousands of dollars for a license. Now it's $1,000. Like anyone can get a license. The
Yeah.
application is like, takes you 5 minutes. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's, having gone through that in some markets, I think it's no fun while you're going through it. But if you have a pretty solid business like yours, I think that you actually have almost an impenetrable a competitive advantage that the new entrants will never be able to overcome unless they have something that's extraordinarily differentiated, revolutionary, something like that, which only, very rare, right? But what's going to happen in the meantime is that struggle as people come in, they produce a bunch of stuff, they go out of business, so they sell everything fire sale. And instead of it being like a one and done, it's a constant flow. So it almost artificially makes the price of these products that fire sale price, which is completely unsustainable. Like we had that in distillate in Michigan. It went from $14,000 a liter down to like $1,200 a liter in less than a year. And then all the way down, I think, to $800 a liter at one point. You literally couldn't even produce it for that price, right? So it was because people were fire selling. There was at least a couple operators who were just bringing in a ton of black market distillate and then selling that in the system. And ironically, when at least one of them got busted, the market changed relatively dramatically. I think the price went up to $8,000 or something in a couple of weeks. And I don't know where it's at today. I'm sure it's settled down. 8,000 is a bit high, I think. To me, like a liter of distillate is probably worth like market rate in a matured market. I don't know, like somewhere in the realm of $2,000. You know what I mean? Certainly not a lot more than that, and certainly not a lot less than that. But you got to go through that volatility in the meantime, I think, before you get to a point of stability. And it sucks being an operator going through that. But I think when you have a bit of dominance, it can give you that, tenacity to make it through. And then when you get to the other side, I mean, the market forces work themselves out. Eventually people go, hey, there's no way to make money. I'm not going to bother getting a license. It may take a year before they say that. But once they do, people stop getting licenses, and all of a sudden that pie gets bigger again. And the people that are left are usually the good operators if they were able to make it through that. And so then you've got a much better environment to operate in, right? Where you've got people that are not going to have that scarcity mindset. They're, not going to have as much toxicity. They're willing to work together because, hey, you guys made it through together, so kind of the silver lining, I suppose, on that one.
Absolutely. We're just trying, we're trying to make it to the other side. It's a rough feeling when, pre rec sales, you just opened the doors and people came and it was real easy. And so I think that's been a challenge definitely for, our executive team and for the owners to really have to pivot that mindset of like, we have to differentiate ourselves, because now, even though we've been here forever and, we've been this local family owned business that people love, there's still something bright and shiny and new that they want to go check out. And like, that's hard to win that back, regardless of how good your product is or how great your customer service is. So floating through this volatility, it's definitely been something that we are managing. So and that's kind of like refocusing back on the inside, because I don't think there's a whole lot, like there's only so many products that weed has, right? There's flour, there's distillate,
there's not a huge amount of innovation.
It's like there's only so many. There's how do you differentiate yourself? And so I think that's where we're kind of trying to reassess and look at ourselves and go back to kind of like our roots of like, what is it did we start this business for, and how can we build that with our teams and our staff, and just giving our customers the best experience possible, because the products are essentially all the same. We're all selling the same thing. So that's hard to market. You can't just be like, well, I have the whatever. No, everybody has
the best. I have the best. The premium.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Premium. Every single one says premium. It means nothing.
It is. And it's like, okay.
So you're going back to your why. I think that's really powerful, and trying to make sure that not only your own company sort of understands and breathes and lives that, but also that your consumer base, your target consumers, understand that too, and the ones that vibe with that can come and be attracted to, then that answers that question of why would they pick you over someone else. Well, because I identify well with this company, they have the same values as me, right? And I think that's pretty important these days, especially the newer generations.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And I think kind of on that note, what I find challenging for myself is managing and kind of capturing the market of a different generation. Because I every day I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm old. Like, apparently I'm old. Like, I don't understand what they, what some of like our younger employees are needing from us. I don't understand like why this is what the customer wants, but and it's just a very different focus in a different generation, and that is one of the areas where I'm definitely trying to understand, learn, and like accommodate, because the needs of a different generation are just completely different from how I operate.
Yeah, and it's the future of the company, right? Ultimately, so gotta learn that stuff and as best we can. I mean, at least in this day and age, we have the internet and social media and stuff to stay more tapped into that. You know, I think back to my grandparents, like, bless them, because how on earth were they gonna stay up to speed on stuff? They had no tools to do so, right? Unless they were just talking to young people all the time. So yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge, but it sounds like you guys are focused on learning more about that and identifying what that looks like. And I think that's going to serve you very well. And that's something that I would recommend any companies with brands, which really every company has a brand, but if you have consumer brand in particular, like, you really need to understand them. And we all hear that, right? It's marketing 101. It's like, okay, yeah, but I still don't see the companies doing that, right? Getting out there, talking to the people, getting feedback, right? Analyzing their behavior in large groups and small groups, and just spending more time with them to learn about that, 100%.
Yeah. I lean on my kids to help me, because like we kind of go through they're all teenagers, and so I will come and be like, I don't understand why this is important, or like what you guys are talking about with like this need to whatever
They're
be
your
seen
personal
in a certain
advisory
way
board.
or whatever, and they're like, oh my God, Mom, let me try to break this down for you. Like,
No, that's
okay,
awesome.
okay.
That's a great resource to tap into. My kids are not quite old enough yet, but I'm sure that it'll be very useful, because I heard that the newest alpha generation, or they're called, they've got like some very weird things that they're into that don't make it like any sense at all. So I'm really looking forward to that. Why don't we move into the standard 4 questions I like to ask everyone? Start off with, what's your favorite book, business book?
I have a lot of, I mean, I guess there can't all be favorites, but I read a lot of business book. Because like I said, I'm always trying to like be better and grow and learn and do the best I possibly can in any position I have. So
Awesome.
I just recently reread, it's an oldie but a goodie, Eat That Frog. I think that might be my
Brian Tracy,
favorite.
right? Yeah, that is
Yeah,
a
it
good
just
one.
kind of goes
Yeah.
back to how I operate, and also like what I think makes any business successful is like organization and keeping track of things, and like knowing where you're going and how do you get there. I think that book is like everybody should read.
I like it because it's not just, it's definitely applicable to organizations, but it's also applicable to people in their professional life and their personal life, because everyone likes to procrastinate on that one thing, right? And that's the thing that they just need to get that out of the way. And then everything else is kind of like easy street from there. And it's so funny because so many people are very, very good at starting projects, maybe even taking them to 99% done, but then they can never finish them off. That's rare that someone can. And I actually think it's very correlated with their ability and desire to go in and just handle the hard stuff, right? Because otherwise you just do all the easy stuff, and it's, if you had a graph of completion, it's going up, but it's not taking care of that one thing that's the tough piece, right? And you just got to get in and do that first, blast through everything else.
Absolutely. The other reason I really like that book is what it's short. It's like in easy, like just everyone can understand it. There's no like deep thoughts here. It's just like straightforward, like tackle the big thing and make lists and just go for it. Like that's great.
Pretty much
It's
every
really
single one of
simple,
Brian
easy
Tracy's
advice
books.
that you're like, oh, duh. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's always the good information, though. It's always the simplest, right? It's just people don't do it. It's not rocket science. It's just that they don't want to do it, so they don't do it, and then they wonder why they're
Oh
not
yeah,
succeeding.
absolutely.
What's your favorite cultivar?
I think my favorite is Clementine, and I haven't had
Hmm.
it in forever. And I wish we would bring that one back here. We used to carry it ourselves, and I just love it. It's like the best, happiest high without all the body high, which I am not a fan
Hmm.
of, but
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
I love that one.
nice. Well, you got to tell your growers to go get a cut and bring it back in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we want to bring back some oldies that are just great. They're just good. So why not bring them back?
Do you guys have the same issue as pretty much every other market where everyone's just obsessed with THC percentage, or do you feel like people there are a little bit more willing to
No,
look
no,
at flavor?
that's it. Like
Hmm.
it it really kind of drives me bonkers actually, because it's like
Yeah.
that's all they care about. And you're like, but there's so much more to the product than just that stupid number. Like, yes, it's important, but it's like a tiny bit, and that drives me crazy. Yeah.
Like you
And
literally,
it's
yeah.
that constant need for like wanting new strains. And like I said,
Mhm.
like I like this one that we used to carry, but because like people always want like the new stuff and they want high THC. So like, what about if you like something, then like it's suddenly no longer on the shelf because like a lot of people are just like, I want new, I want new, I want new. And you're like,
Isn't
but
that
what
weird?
about the thing
It's
that
the
works for me?
it's like so people try to equate cannabis with alcohol or with other CPG, and it's like that one thing that you just mentioned, the I like to call it the ADD of the cannabis consumer. It's so true, and it's way more similar to like fashion or music or something like that, where they need
Yeah,
that new thing all the time. Because imagine if someone was
absolutely.
like, I don't know, like I really like Ben and Jerry's, Cherry Garcia, and then but God forbid that I see that in the supermarket the next time. It better be a whole new lineup every single time, and I will only try it one time, and then the novelty's worn off, and I need something else. Like that's really hard as a producer. You just really can't create some of those efficiencies that you get from just having stuff for a long time. And it's weird because I feel like anyone that smoked back in the day, there wasn't that. At least I'm from Humboldt. We didn't have that. It was like we liked, Maui Wowie and Alaskan Thunderfuck and like OG.
Yeah,
Like that was,
it was
what you
that was
liked
it.
and that was what you smoked, right? And so the idea of like always having to have something new is kind of like a new thing. And then combined with the THC percentage, it just wipes out the opportunity for a lot of these nostalgic strains that actually there's a reason why everyone had a great time back in the day smoking is because they provide a
Yeah,
really great high. you know
exactly. Yeah.
that's
I
fair.
think that kind of drives me bonkers with like coming up with new things to put on the shelves. Like, can't we just like have some good old fashioned whatever strains? Like they were great for a reason. And so let's
Yeah,
but I don't understand the need for constantly like new things, and maybe that's part of my it's I don't know if it's a generational thing or just like where the market is currently that they always want something new and the highest THC level. I don't understand it, and that's what's challenging for me because I don't shop that way, and so that is really weird.
I think it's because cannabis has gone from being kind of a counterculture to being like a popular culture, right? A pop culture thing. And so that is why there's so much like intermixing and similarities with things like music, right?
Mm.
Like you look at the way that a lot of growers and manufacturers and stuff act, and they kind of act like they think they're rock stars, right? Like they think everyone cares.
That's
It's like
true.
imagine again, let me go like imagine an ice cream producer. It's like just I'm a master ice cream producer and like my shit is fire and everyone else's sucks. It's weird everybody out. It's just like so strange. Even a winemaker saying something like that doesn't make sense, right? But in cannabis, it's very common that people are just high on their own supply, I suppose, and just
Yeah,
think that
absolutely.
they're God's gift to the earth. And I think that the consumers feed off that energy too. And there is like a very diva type of atmosphere in many ways, which makes it
Mm.
really hard to do what you do and what I've done, which is like that almost dry systems based thing, right? Where we have to
Yeah.
build systems. That stuff doesn't go very well with this sort of like diva artisan mindset. Like I think you can bring in the artisan qualities of the product, but the people can't have that like it's like back in the day when you had the master and then the apprentice and the journeyman. I mean, I don't remember which book I was reading. I think it was Team of Teams by General McChrystal, and he was actually talking about a different book, which was called The One Right Way, I think it's called. I haven't read that, but I really want to read it. And it talks about how industry used to be, which for the longest time was, right, you'd have a master, whatever, right, shoemaker, blacksmith, or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like all their knowledge was in their head, and they thought that they were way better than everybody
Yeah.
else. It was just typical. Everyone else sucks. My way is the right way to do it. And then someone would have to go learn under them for years, decades, maybe even, and often they would treat them like crap and make them do all the dirty work, and they were just like on this pedestal. And as I was listening to them describe this, I'm like, holy crap, this is the cannabis
Yeah.
industry. Like so much, right? Is that's the big challenge in the beginning when you come in, is like, I need to take all this tribal knowledge out of your head and put it into a system so that it's
Mm.
owned by the company, not by you. And it's really hard to do that often. But I feel like
No,
when you
absolutely.
do
Yeah.
that, it sort of pulls away from that egotistical mentality sometimes a little bit.
That's true. Obviously it's like ego driven, but sometimes, and ego, I think often is driven by fear, but it's like,
Hmm.
I don't, it's how do we get our growers specifically too, to feel that no, or anybody in the organization, how do you make them feel safe and valuable and share the information? Because I think a lot of times people feel valuable if they share their information. It's like,
Hmm.
well, now anybody is going to be able to do it. It's like, yeah, but that's not what makes you valuable. Like just you
Right.
hoarding all the information is not what makes you valuable. You're more valuable if you can teach others and bring them up. But that's a hard thing to drill into some people because they fear their value in that if they share their
You're
knowledge.
so right. That is a great insight. So true. I think what's worked for me somewhat in that sense, but typically more with the folks that are maybe a little bit lower level. It's hard when it's like the head of cultivation, head grower or something, right? Like that's going to be a bit more of a challenge to make them part ways with that if that's their mentality. But going back to what you were saying about getting them to feel comfortable with their value, for me, it's always been about showing them the context of what they're doing, especially in a vertically integrated company, because they
Mm,
don't even necessarily understand just unless you show them, right, that the thing that they're doing that might seem monotonous, in the manufacturing line is actually critical for this end product, right? And that's why I love it when they go to the stores and they see and even are able to purchase their own product that they made, and they can be like, I made that, or I helped grow that flower or whatever. Like that is probably one of the beauties of vertical integration that I've always liked, is letting people see both sides of what's going on and where there's maybe perhaps small role, but it's still a critical role, just like every other role, right? To get these things from seed to sale.
yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's yeah, because some of the jobs can be very monotonous, right? I mean, like packing flour is a monotonous job, but without them, it doesn't get on the shelf. So it's like
Right.
you have to find ways to make everyone understand that like your cog in this machine is critical, even though it feels not, or it feels like, oh, I just come and do this one thing every day. And it's like, but it's critical to the organization. So how you can express that and show that, I think, is incredibly valuable. And I think that's a great way, like you were saying, to just kind of like maybe do like internal tours of the company.
Oh yeah.
It's be like, hey, what you do affects what happens over here, and what you do is important in this side. So I love that idea. That's a
Or
really
having
important factor.
having the retail team come help during harvest for a day or a half day even, and see what the farming crew goes through. They get such a different
Oh
level of
yeah.
respect because everyone thinks their job's the hardest, right? Like the retail team in
Yeah.
particular is, I've always heard that, right? It's like we have to deal with all the crabby customers all day, and yeah, that sucks. But like, you ever gone out in the middle of the rain? It's freezing cold, and doesn't matter. You got to get harvest done. And you're sitting there and you're covered in trichomes and just mud and
Yeah.
everything else, and your hands are all bleeding from stripping stalks and stuff. Like that's brutal.
We had a time where we're, talking about, lean teams and how can we maybe like kind of move some of our teams around when they have downtime. And we did have some of our packing crew go help during harvest. And they were like, that job's hard. We're like, yeah, man,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying. You have a cushy job over here. Like that one's really hard.
I actually had one lady on our, we did a similar thing because we were low on people for our harvest one year, and we were kind of didn't really need to do a lot of production at the time, and so we sent the crew over and had the exact same experience, except for one girl who ended up like staying on the cultivation team. She just loved it. And it
Oh,
was
that's
it was
great.
interesting because at first I was a little worried because I thought that she was going to be complaining about, at that time it was the heat, not the cold and the rain, but yeah, I for whatever reason, she just like being outside and being close to the plants. I get it. So the other thing I would say is, like, even with packing flower, it's not just that it's critical that they do the job, it's also critical that they do it well, and being able to show them like the impact of doing a crappy job. For instance, if they don't weigh it out appropriately and people get shorted, or if they're putting a bunch of small C grade nugs in there, right? And you show them like who's going to want to buy a jar of that, right? Like the things that they do every day, someone's going to buy that actual product, and they're either going to have a great experience or they're going to have a crappy experience. Like, if anything, the packagers often have the most impact on that, you know?
That's a great point. Yeah. And it all goes back to, yeah, customer experience because, the products are all the same. So if they,
Right.
yeah, a customer is going to be pissed if they have crap, it's like obviously not weighed out. And we've seen that before, that happens every now and then.
Yeah.
Errors happen, but it in the market that we're in now, there's just no room for that either. So it's like you guys have to understand how critical every single piece is, because all it takes is one shitty experience for someone to be like,
Mhm.
"Fuck this, I'm gonna go try the one right next door."
100%.
It's every step is absolutely crucial to the end customer experience.
Absolutely. What do you like to do outside of your cannabis time? I know you said you like to work all the
Mm.
time, but what other hobbies and things you like to do?
Yeah, when I am not working, I love any chance I get to travel. I like being outside, experiencing new places. My husband and I recently went to Spain this year,
Hmm.
and that was incredible.
Where'd you
Just
go?
experience any like new experience. I'm like really into. I just want to and be outside because a lot of the time I'm inside all the day, every day. So it's like if I get a chance to go hiking or whatever outside with my kids. That's always great. On Labor Day, it was a really nice day. We actually just like worked out in the yard together. And it was like, that was great.
Oh man, family life. Where'd you guys go in Spain? I love Spain. I've only been there once, but went to Barcelona and Ibiza. I'm definitely, that's like my next trip that I'm trying to plan, is I want to go back to that area.
We did kind of like a southern tour. So we did like Barcelona, Malaga, Sevilla, and then we like darted off to Portugal and went to this island called Madeira that was incredible. And so we did about 2 weeks and just kind of hopped along the bottom coast there, and it was, oh my God, it's so incredible. We definitely want to go back and then do like the northern part of the country because apparently that's just like a whole other
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And were you able to go over there and not have to focus on work?
Oh yeah, I like when I am on like a big vacation, I'm completely offline. I was like, I prepped everyone,
That's
I got
good.
everybody where they needed to be, and then I was like, I'm not taking my computer. I remove email off of my phone. I remove Slack. Like there is no
Well, that's
getting a
great.
hold of me, guys.
Yeah, that's good. I'm ashamed to say this, but my wife's family's from Poland, and we were in Poland one year back, I want to say 2019 or something, maybe 2018. And I was in like the beginning startup chaos of building out like our sort of vertical in California. And I literally went to Poland for a week, didn't even bother adjusting my time clock at all. I would go to bed at like, I don't know, I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. when everyone else was up. I would work until 8 a.m. and then like I'd fall asleep at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I did that the entire time. I didn't have to adjust my clock when I got back either. And it was pathetic, but
Oh,
it's
that's
hard,
rough.
especially when it's a startup, it's like, do you really have
Oh yeah.
the infrastructure in place yet to do that? But that's great that you're able to hold yourself accountable to enjoying your time, so.
Yeah, it's like one, I do what I do because I like work. That's just my personality. I enjoy like the satisfaction of completing things and seeing something grow.
Hmm.
But I also very much enjoy a time where I do not look at it for 1 second. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really awesome.
It makes you better at your job if you have that time to recharge, and something I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I've driven myself into the ground plenty of times to know that like this is not good. And I have my husband's a really great partner. He operates the same as well. So we see it in each
Hmm.
other and we have to call each other out to be like, hey, maybe take a day off. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I can't. And then we're like, yeah, you can.
That's interesting. I feel like it could either be a strength or a weakness. It's a strength because if they tell you, like my wife and I are quite different. So if she tells me something, I'm kind of like, oh, you just don't understand, right? But like, obviously,
Yeah.
if someone like you says it, then you're going to believe them more. The question is, are you as able to catch it if you both suffer from the same stuff? So it's kind of that
Yeah.
trade-off, I feel like.
It is. Oddly enough, somehow we have managed to like find this like when I'm here like super high working and it's like crazy, he's not and like is
Hmm.
kind of
He's
the
doing the New
anchor. And
Mexico
then when
thing.
he's off, it's like, oh, okay, now one of us is always able to see what's happening with the other. God
Yeah.
forbid there's a time when we're both just like absolutely bonkers and like who will regulate this?
Oh Lord. Well, last question. Where can we find out more about you, connect with you, as well as your company, Instagram, LinkedIn, things like that? I will post any links in the show notes, but if you want to just shout them off here, that'd be great.
Best Days is on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all the same. We're at bestdays.com is our website. And yeah, I'll shoot off all those links. That way it's easy for everyone to find us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do over the next year or so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is really awesome to just kind of chat and talk shop and hopefully anybody kind of picks up a few tips and where things might help them out. I just
Oh, I'm
think
sure. Yeah.
there's always room for everyone to learn. And so the best way to learn is from people who've already kind of been through it. So I hope that happens.
100%. Love it.